Dark Bleatings everyone, I'm Kaylee, also known as Goat Leader from Happy Goat Horror, and today we're continuing with our Ranking Every Stephen King Book series. This is part 2, I'll link part 1 in the description in case you missed it and you'd like to check that out first. But we're going to start with number 70 on the list today, out of 77. We're going in reverse order from my least to best favourites. I could have phrased that a bit better, but whatever. So, let's just go straight in. At number 70 we have Elevation. This is a little bit of a weird one. It's about a man who is losing weight but not mass somehow, and every time I talk about losing or gaining mass I think about Mac from It's Always Sunny. Can we use this? It has political like this is clearly politics was on Stephen King's mind when he wrote this. I could see why this might grate against some people. There's a lesbian couple in this book, and I really enjoy and appreciate seeing representation of people who aren't like the author. I appreciate the kind of effort that's made, and I sincerely believe that Stephen King tries really hard, especially in this sort of in the last 10 or so years of his career. There's been a noticeable effort to write characters who aren't straight white male writers, for example, but I just think that sometimes he just goes a little bit wrong. There's a scene in this book where I don't want to say where it is because I don't want to I'm not going to do any spoilers really, but the protagonist doesn't get along with one of the ladies, and there's an instance in which he helps her, which I thought was strange because I felt like the book was trying to say something else. And I think I would have preferred it if it had been the other way around, like if she'd helped him instead. If you've read it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Please discuss it with me in the comments, actually. I just don't want to give anything away for people who haven't read it yet and don't like to know anything, because I prefer to go into a book basically blind. So I do think the efforts were made here, but it fell a bit short for me. And also the ending was bizarre, in a kind of Joe Hill bizarre way, actually, which I don't know how I feel about it still, and I read it, when it came out. So number 69, I don't have a physical copy with its own cover because it's included in the Bachman books, which is what I have, but it is The Running Man, which always reminds me of Arnold Schwarzenegger for obvious reasons because he played the protagonist in the movie. It's a dystopian thriller, I guess you'd say, more a thriller than a horror, where a lot of people in the future are really, really poor and really struggling to keep themselves alive basically, and there's a sort of televised game show that you can enter, and if you stay alive for so long you win prize money. I think that's the premise. If I'm wrong, please correct me. So this guy gets signed up for it, and then goes on the run while people are hunting him. It's kind of I'll tell you, the movie that reminded me of it was the one with Daniel Radcliffe in it. That's bothering me that I cannot remember what it's called. It'll come back to me probably 3 videos from now. But yeah, it had that kind of has that kind of feel. I did enjoy it. I probably wouldn't pick it up again anytime soon, but it was fun. At number 68 we have Joyland, which is from the Hard Case Crime. I always want to say Hard Boiled Crime. Hard Case Crime. These just aren't my favourite. He's done 3 of these, and it's just because they're not horror that these just aren't really my bag. This is more of a crime thriller about a man who works in a fun fair. I mean, it's okay. It's a little bit forgettable for me. Again, that's probably nothing to do with the actual book. It's just not my preferred genre. And not only is it not my preferred genre, but it's one that I actively avoid. I really, really am just so not interested in crime thrillers. Crime of any kind, really, unless there's like an extra horror element or something. I'm not interested. So I listened to the audiobook of this. I cannot remember who narrated it, but I did really enjoy it, but I just wouldn't pick it up again. So, next on the list, just consult the old list. What number are we on? 67. 67. It's The Talisman, and I know I'm going to get flack for this, so it was co-written with Peter Straub or Straub, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, I'm sorry. It's quite beefy. I think it's something, well, I was going to say 700 pages, but it's over 900 pages. This is about a boy called Jack who basically goes on a quest to try and save his mother's life, and he's sort of going in and out of a parallel world. So it's got very strong Dark Tower vibes. I think the reason that I don't like this more than I do is because it was so overhyped. Every time I asked anyone, oh, what should my next King read be? Everyone was like, The Talisman, you will love The Talisman. And I don't know why people thought I would love it, because I haven't read a lot of fantasy, and this is very much a fantasy book more than anything else. And it's not that I dislike fantasy, but I'm just not a seasoned fantasy reader. I've almost just been exclusively reading horror for my whole life. I've only just started branching out. So for me, and I know that fantasy novels tend to be longer as well than most other genres, so maybe that's what it was. Maybe I just didn't click with it. The parts that everyone else doesn't like about, the parts that people usually complain about are the parts I really engaged with, and then but it was like, I think it was just the overall main story that I started feeling a bit like, come on, like, are we gonna get to the end? And also I almost hesitate to say this because I'm sure that people are going to be mad about it, but I just didn't like Wolf. I found him really annoying, and I feel so bad because everybody loves that character. Maybe it's just the way that I imagined him, or maybe it was the voice that he had in my head that was grating against me every time he said wolf, wolf. I was like, so you know, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm a super grump or something. But yeah, it just wasn't my favorite one, but you know, I did like it. Number 60, I can never remember what number we're on from book to book. 66 is The Gunslinger, the first in the Dark Tower series. Now, again, this is kind of, I say again, I was just referring to the last video. This is a svelte book for Stephen King. It's not even 300 pages. This is the first book in the Dark Tower series. It's about sort of Roland's origin a little bit, and just sets you up with your protagonist for the rest of the Dark Tower series, basically. Your protagonist and your antagonist. I always, whenever I'm recommending The Dark Tower to people, I always say The Dark Tower is an amazing series, but The Gunslinger is the weakest book in the series, and you kind of just have to read it to get to the next one. I didn't enjoy this one that much, but I was assured by the people who recommended it to me that just to go on to the next book, which is The Drawing of the Three, which I absolutely loved. So I think maybe I would like to reread this, because I think I just didn't appreciate it for what it was at the time. And I will say, this book has got my favourite opening line of all time in it, from any book ever, and I'm not the only person who thinks this. It's constantly coming up in lists. I don't know why I'm even looking it up, because I know it by heart. It's the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. That is one of the best, that's got to be up there in the best opening lines ever. Yeah, the whole series is amazing though, and you should read it. Number 65 is Billy Summers. In the last video I said that on this list I like everything on it. I didn't like this that much. It's come above other things because I really liked the first half a lot more than like the overall book for most of the others, but I had trouble connecting with this main character. I found the setup interesting for who he was, and I don't know where I thought it was going to go, but again, I just thought this was a bit long for what it is. And there is, for me, I know I've already griped about something being problematic with Elevation, but there is a character setup in this book. A young woman is introduced, and the way that she's introduced is really hard to read. Check the trigger warnings before you pick it up. And I really did not like how the aftermath of what she went through was depicted. I thought it was, this is just my perspective, so this wouldn't apply to everybody, I'm sure, but I just thought it was unrealistic, handled a little bit weirdly. Like, again, I think that maybe he tried, but I just didn't like, I don't know, there was something that just made me feel very uncomfortable with the reading. And this isn't like the first book where an older man strikes up some sort of relationship with a woman that's much younger than him. It's like, I see this all the time in a lot of books I read. It doesn't quite... I don't want to say too much about it. I don't want to do spoilers, but there's a lot about this book that made me feel really uncomfortable. In hindsight, maybe I should have put it a bit further down the list than it is. But yeah, there were elements I really enjoyed about that one. But as far as his recent works go, like, this is one of his most recent books, I wouldn't reread that one, personally. Next on the list... Sorry, I don't mean to look... Next on the list... 64, it's Lisey's Story. This is another one that people kept recommending over and over and over to me, assuring me that I was absolutely going to love it. And I did love the first half. That's a common theme with the video so far, is I really liked the first half of a book and then not so much the back half. That's not typical for me with Stephen King, but that's why these are all in the lower rankings, I guess. This is about a lady whose husband was an author, and unfortunately he dies. And she starts to find out some things after his death, and there's a real creepy character that pops up and causes all kinds of trouble for her. I think this is sort of like a horror fantasy, I would say. I guess I didn't like the fantasy elements. I was intrigued at first, and then there were things that really grated on me. She and her husband have their own sort of love language. That bothered me. I'm not the first person to say that. I've watched so many reviews, people talking about this book, where they talk about the language that this couple use and the words they use. It's annoying. All right, I'm going to move on because it's annoying me to think about it. I probably would reread this one a bit later. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood for the kind of story that it is. But yeah, let's just move on to number 63. And it's another recent one. It is Fairy Tale. Oh, the most recent one, actually. This again is much more... This is a fantasy, basically. It is about a boy who, like a teenager, who befriends an elderly man who's like very reclusive and grumpy. He's not very popular, but this teenager finds him injured and befriends the old man and his dog and takes care of him in his time of need, and they strike up what reads like a really sincere and touching friendship. And that's like the first half of the book. There's a lot of setup, but I loved it so much. I was really enjoying it. And then it was when we get to the more fantastical elements again that I was like, started to, snore a little bit. This is a common theme with me, so I think this is just my reading preferences. So this guy, after the old man dies, this guy discovers what's in his shed. Very intriguing. I would recommend this to people who enjoy fantasy and people who enjoy Stephen King. I probably would reread this, but it's going to be years before I pick this back up. This isn't one I would go reaching for on a rainy day or anything. So let's move on to number 62. It's Black House, the sequel to The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. Moving on. I liked this significantly more than The Talisman. I know people are normally the other way around. This one was a lot more horror than fantasy, unlike the other one. This is Jack all grown up, and where is he now? Which world is he in? And there is a killer, and it's a savage killer. And I really enjoyed it. I prefer a horror stance, basically. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I haven't got much to say about it. I can't talk about it too much because like almost everything is a spoiler. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. The book it's most similar to, funnily enough, is The Outsider, which is also by Stephen King. There are some similarities here, but I enjoyed that one very much. And last on this list, at number 61, is Gwendy's Button Box, which now that I'm saying this, I think I would put Black House above it, actually. And maybe fairy tale, I don't know. But this is a little, I'd say this is a novella really. Yeah, it's about 150, 60 pages, something like that. It's about a girl called Gwendy who meets a man. I think his name is Richard Farris. It's something Farris if it's not Richard. And he gives her a box that has buttons on it. And the buttons have very large effect if she presses them. And there's some magic. And I don't have a whole lot to say about it. It's fine. This is fine. I might reread this. This is a trilogy, so the second book is called Gwendy's Magic Feather. Oh, sorry, yeah, I should have mentioned. This is a co-written book with Richard Chizmar. Richard Chizmar wrote the second book in the series alone, so that wasn't a co-written effort. Funnily enough, everything that I didn't like about this book, I was very unfairly blaming on Richard Chizmar. I tend to do that if it's a co-written book with Stephen King and there are things I don't like. I'm like, well, that must have been the other guy, which is completely wrong, unfair, and illogical, I know. And I ate those words because the second book in the series, Gwendy's Magic Feather, which is not going to be included in this list because it's not a Stephen King book, is my favourite in the trilogy. I really enjoyed it. I think that it's the best one. But yeah, so that one is number 61. Sorry, I lost where I was again. So this is number 61. This is the last book for this video. Hopefully in the next one we're going to get more into the books that I really like and I can enthuse a little bit more about. Please let me know where you would rank these if you've read them. If any of these are in your favourites, I'm particularly interested to know if any of these would be in your top 10 and I'd love to talk to you. Thank you for hanging out with me. I will see you in the next one.